Hey, what's up, tribe? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the TFC audio project Down Under. This week I chat with Braeden Small, who is a movement coach and TFC foot nerd based in Brisbane. In this episode, we chat about her journey with movement and her approach with clients, the power of balance training on both feet and hands, as well as the importance of moving through discomfort and fear in training, rehab, and life.
This week's episode is brought to you by TFC Balance Beams. They're our favourite simple tool for training balance in a fun and playful way, and each beam comes with our online beam training system to help you get started. We also wanted to say a huge thanks to everyone who's bought one so far. For every order from our store, we donate $5 to Reforest Now to plant a tree to restore rainforests here in Australia. And we're pretty proud to say that your support so far has helped us plant more than 650 trees and counting. If you don't live in Oz but want one of our beams, we do ship internationally. Our 90cm beams are an affordable option as shipping works out quite a bit cheaper. We also offer wholesale prices for any practitioners, instructors or coaches who believe in the importance of balance training and want to get their clients involved. Send us a message on Instagram at tfc.australia or via email at info@tfc-shopaus.com.
All right, so Braeden, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this chat. I've had a few chats with some of the Melbourne foot nerds now and really enjoyed them. Chats with foot nerds seem to flow really well. And at least this one, I don't have to travel quite as far.
Yeah.
So you're actually the only foot nerd besides myself that's based in Brisbane. And as far as I know, you're the only foot nerd who also likes balancing on their hands.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
It's good, yeah.
We've had some hand balancing sessions and I've got a few tips from you, which have been really helpful. And I'm sure we'll delve into the concept of hand balancing because it's a pretty cool concept. But before we do, I usually just like to start the podcast with, a bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do it, either from a personal or professional point of view, or both.
Yeah.
So we'll just start with that.
Cool. So how far back do you want me to go?
Ooh, as far as you like. It can be life story or it can be summarised.
Well, I grew up in Brizzy. And I guess, the thing that got me into what I'm doing today and the thing that I think really brought me to sort of having passion around movement was, I guess, my introduction to gymnastics when I was about 7 years old. So with gymnastics, it's probably one of the only sports that you actually do barefoot, now that I think about it.
Wow. Besides badminton.
Yeah.
That's a new sport though, but yes.
It's the only sort of thing where I really found at that time in my life that I really belonged and I really loved it. And I think that's where I found my passion for movement and obviously hand balancing and just health in general. So I guess seeing both of my parents were very active, and especially my dad more so than my mum. And seeing him so active, I think, is also a big contributing factor that sort of brought me to where I am today. So, I'm a movement coach based out of Kelvin Grove, specialising now post foot nerd course more so in feet, foot mechanics, and how all of that is relevant to movement as a whole and how it affects the rest of your body. So my training philosophy is train so that your body can be in the best possible condition it should be in. And everything I do for myself and my clients is based around that philosophy. So I think, working in an industry that's so saturated with so much information about health and wellness and longevity, I really wanted to just do what I do to make it simple for people and educate them that way. So, yeah.
You touched on a couple of really important concepts there, and one of which is training so that your body can be in the best condition possible for your body, I suppose, for each individual. Everyone's going to be different, but everyone also has a lot more potential than they realize or than they're expressing at that time. And that is quite a different, it's becoming more and more, I guess, common or popular or valued, that mindset. But I also know, like, if you look at Instagram or just look at the general state of the fitness industry, that isn't what most people are training for. Most people are training for a certain look or a certain muscle size or a certain waistline or those kinds of things. So has function been something you've always focused on as a result of, I guess, your upbringing with gymnastics, or was there a time that have you transitioned to that way of thinking? Or
yeah, so I think, like, again, being a part of an industry that's so saturated in information on the way that you look, I thought that, like, for me coming into the industry, I thought that was like quite a simple thing. Like, I thought that because I feel like I mastered that so soon, and obviously, you know, we all to a degree care what we look like. We don't just do this for function.
Yeah, it's part of a primal status thing.
Totally. Yeah. Like, you know, we would be lying if we said we didn't care what we looked like. So I think that, like, that's something that I feel like I mastered early in the industry, and I didn't find passion in helping people with that. Like, I thought, you know, when I had sessions with people when they were feeling strong or they were feeling like pain-free, that was the most rewarding thing for me. And I had a few sessions earlier on where people were sort of like I had an older woman come to me and ask me to put her on her health fund. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not actually a health professional, like, qualified to do that. I can't do that for you. And she was like, yeah, but you help me be more pain-free than my physio does. And I'm like, whoa, like, that's cool. Like, the fact that you can, like, help people with that. I think that's what brought me to doing that today. More so focused. Yeah.
So it's experiencing the results. So you're helping people with function. You never really have, like, never really valued people helping people chase a look, but you value people helping people improve their movement. And interestingly, mind you, again, it is changing a lot more lately, but interestingly, physios, or traditionally, a lot of physios haven't been helping people with their movement. They've been helping people with their symptoms. Yeah. And this is where people like movement coaches and personal trainers actually have generally a lot more power to help people in the right way, because people are seeing their personal trainer once or twice a week, and actually, you know, they expect to be receiving movement from a personal trainer or maybe an exercise physiologist and so on. And obviously there's different scopes of practice that we need to respect, but the idea there is that someone's movement health can have such a huge carryover into all the other aspects of their health. And, you know, you might be seeing a physio, you know, I'm a physio as well, and I've experienced this. You might be seeing a physio for your pain, and a lot of physios do tend to rely on more passive modalities, and that might help with your pain, but it doesn't actually necessarily help with your overall movement health. Yeah,
totally. And I think, like, another thing too is taking a really holistic approach. I think for whatever reason, just our way of life now has sort of led us into the direction of really picking things apart and not looking at things holistically. Everything is connected. I'm a big believer in that. Like, nothing is separate. Everything influences the next thing, and we are trying to separate everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. There's a big reductionist tendency in our society for people to specialize into certain aspects. So we have a specialization for the feet in podiatrists. We have a specialization in hands and different organs and you know, this and that, or different organ systems. And, you know, of course there is a role and a place for specialization, but it does really need to be balanced out with that globalized, holistic look at the body and understanding that none of these systems work in isolation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think when you, like, take those principles and apply it for yourself, you really, really, really notice it. And with that comes a flexible lifestyle as well. I think it requires a lot of time, and a lot of people's lifestyles don't allow that almost, which is a struggle as well. So I think it's also, like, how can we integrate the two worlds? Like, how can we make this way of seeing things work with the new way that is today with the fast-paced work environments and stuff like that? It's sort of like integrating the two.
Yeah, that's really important. I think I would say a couple of things about that. One is that I think a lot of people have a limiting belief that they don't have time to work on certain things, and eventually their body will force them to make the time.
Totally.
And, you know, at first people are like, oh, I'm too busy to move, or I'm too busy to do prehab exercises or to change anything about my lifestyle. I'm just too busy, too stressed. And in one sense, that is a failure of, I guess, our work-focused society, that everyone is chasing more and more hours, or maybe even having to do more and more hours to work more and more hours to feed their family or whatever, or pay off their mortgage, or all of these important things. So in one sense, it is that failure of society, but in another sense, if you don't make time for it now, you'll be forced to prioritize time for it later. And whether that's in the form of physio session, like your body goes, no, this is very important now, and it gives you that in the signal of pain. And then you go, okay, now I actually have to deal with this. And by that time, it's actually a lot harder to deal with than if you just put in the habits and steps to prevent that from happening.
Totally.
That's why the saying is, I believe the saying is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah.
Because you actually spend a lot less time preventing than you do trying to fix something.
Totally.
And then our healthcare systems aren't necessarily well set up to, quote unquote, fix these chronic lifestyle problems. They're more set up to deal with symptoms and manage more emergency situations, which it is very good at, managing the symptoms and, you know, even preventing death in emergency situations. But
it has its place. Yeah,
it has its place.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was something else I was going to say about what you said, but I guess, that sort of signals the bigger problem is people don't think they've got time until they have to make time.
Yeah, and that's...
And I guess that's where we come in, or why it's so important to show people enjoyable ways of moving. Like, because I think people are in that sort of very work-focused mindset, and they get if that gets reinforced by the health professional, like, you have to do these exercises and these rehab exercises and these prehab exercises, and they're boring, and it becomes another chore. And I've experienced it myself, even as a physio student. I was given things to do by a physio, and I was like, this is really boring. Like, I didn't end up doing them consistently. And if you don't do something consistently, then you don't get the result that you should be getting. And so either you need someone sort of on your back all the time to go, you should be doing this, or you have something that
someone calling you, like,
have you done your
2 times a day?
Which is not necessarily sustainable. And there are all these methods of, I guess, there are all these methods like apps and things like that track how you're going, and you can do all these things to sort of optimize for that. And obviously there are periods and contexts where just working through the boredom of a certain thing will get you the result. But we also need to, again, balance that with that play-based approach of this is actually really fun to do. And once you develop a certain level of skill in this area, like, say, balancing on a beam or balancing on your hands, suddenly you get all of this amazing benefit to your feet and hands and arms and core and all of these things, whilst it's just balancing on a beam, or it's like it's addictive. I mean, we can both agree that balancing your hands and balancing on a beam is really fun and even addictive. So you just end up wanting to do it, and it's not an extra chore that you have to add on. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I've seen that with I use the beam with my clients like regularly, and as soon as they get on the beam, they change, like they're a child again. And I think intent is everything too. Like, that makes a difference when you've got, like you're saying, you've got physio exercises to do. If you approach that with poor intent, you're never going to do the exercise properly or get the benefit of it. But if you approach something with the intent of play, you'll get so much more out of it as well. Yeah.
And even if you have more of a play-based mindset to your work. I think that's good. I think that's something that needs to be valued even more, is like, yes, there are going to be periods where you have to actually work and exert yourself, and that's how you make change in your body, is through working outside of your comfort zone and pushing your limits a little bit. But having that exploratory, creative mindset, and not just sticking to, oh, the physio said this many reps and this many sets, so I'm going to do this, you know. And again, there's nuance, because in certain contexts, sticking to that sort of programming is important.
Yeah.
But also you have to have flexibility. If you're just sticking to a program and completely ignoring the signs that you're getting from your body that you can do more, or that you should do less, or whatever.
Yeah, it's not very feels based. We're we're creatures, we're animals. Like, we need to pay attention to that stuff and not base everything off like reps and sets and weight
and all these numbers.
Yeah.
Because there's a place for it, but it's sort of soul sucking. Like, you want to, it's not very empowering if someone's just saying, you know, stick to these. And not that there's that many people that are saying you have to do this many reps and sets, but generally the more empowering approach is to say, hey, look, you know, your body's going to give you signs about what kind of volume of this activity it can tolerate, or how much it can tolerate, and how much, you know, or whether you should be doing more or whatever. And linking people or encouraging people to tap into that intuition, and that inner, like the interoception, like all of these signs that they're getting from inside their body about how they're going, like their energy and pain levels and, you know, appetite and all of these things that our bodies are telling us, that aren't based on numbers of macros and, you know, even heart rate variability and sleep quality and all of these things that can be measured on our devices now, and steps, and, you know, they can be helpful, but if you just rely on all these numbers all the time, then you're just tuning out from what your body's telling you as well.
Totally. Fully agree. Yeah.
And have you found that with clients as well? Like, I imagine some people, you know, if it's their first time on a beam, they're probably like, why is she making me do this?
Yeah.
What's the point of this? I'm not working out here.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah, true.
And then do you have like is there light bulb moments that you see, or gradual transitions where people are like, oh, I'm looking forward to getting on the beam?
Yeah, some people, definitely. Some more than others. Some people are more responsive. The main, like, positive feedback I get from the beam is like when someone's playing on there for a while and they finally get their balance and the ability to stay on there for longer than a few minutes, and they go, oh my God, like I can really feel my glutes. Yeah. Like, you can, if you're doing it, you know, if you're on there long enough, you can really feel the effects of it. So that's probably, that's the most feedback I've gotten, like good positive feedback from the beam. Yeah.
And then people, because at first, and I imagine it's the same for hand balancing, but at first it's like, I just can't do this. Like, this is way too hard. Or, I mean, some people pick up the beam a lot easier, but especially for hand balancing. Yeah. You look at someone do a handstand and you're like, oh, that doesn't look that hard. And then you try and kick up in one, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, how? Like, I don't get how I'm supposed to be standing. And same thing with the beam. Like, I guess people would see you or me, or, you know, someone who's spent time on a beam, standing on a beam, they're like, oh, that, you know, what, I don't get it. They're just standing on a beam. And then they go and stand on the beam and they're like, oh, right, it's really hard. Yeah. And all of these movements that people are doing on this is actually really hard. And you feel your feet, you feel your glutes, you feel your whole body moving in all these different ways to remain stable. Yeah. And then you get that sort of light bulb moment of like, oh, right, I get it. And I think picking up the beam is way easier than picking up a handstand.
Yeah, totally.
Because our legs have been carrying our full body weight around all our life. And so there is that, at least some level of strength and conditioning and so on in that. But I do like the similarities between a good static handstand
and the
beam, or just, you know, it's just balance on your legs in general, and how it's a bit hard to talk about in a podcast, I suppose, but how all of your joints align and stack to create this balanced position, and the activation of your core and all of these things, and learning to balance on your hands can actually tell you a lot about just overall how you should balance in general.
Totally,
and
yeah.
how
It's a great
you
assessment.
how you should align, or what optimal, or quote unquote optimal or efficient alignment of your joints is, because when you align your joints in a good way or in an efficient way and they're stacked, then you maintain balance. And obviously you're gripping with your hands and your fingers, which sort of simulates what's happening with our feet on the ground. And similarly, when you're on the beam, like you get that instant feedback. If you're balancing on your hands and your alignment goes off, then you fall down.
Yeah, totally.
Or you correct it quickly enough.
Yeah.
But most of the time you fall down.
Yeah.
And on the beam, if your knee collapses into valgus and your foot pronates and you get into that position, it's not a bad position, but if you don't get control of that and get it back into the aligned position, then you fall off.
Yeah.
And then you get this feedback. You don't need someone telling you, oh, look, you collapsed into valgus, avoid that. The beam just goes, oh, you fell off. And then your brain, this is that explorative play aspect where your brain goes, it just collects all of that data. And then it goes, okay, this is how I organize myself, and this is how I organize my body to remain stable.
And you become so much more connected with your body as well when you're on the beam and when you're doing handstands. Like, both of them are such a great assessment tool, because you get someone on the beam, it'll tell you everything you need to know about their body just like instantly. Like you can do all these fancy assessments, but the beam just uncovers everything.
Yeah.
And same with handstands. Like, if you're working through like an 8-week block of like if I do my 8-week handstand course, just going start to finish and going through all the steps and processes leading up to, the final goal, which is a handstand, along the way, it will reveal different things about your body that you might not have already known. Like, you have weakness here, you have instability here, this is why you can't do this is why you can't do that. And the more that we do things like that, and the more that we play and use our body in multiple planes in different ways, the more connected we become with our body as well. So the more we learn about our body, and then I think long term, that's great. Like, long term, you're gonna avoid things like injuries and falls and stuff like that. Like, moving your body in so many different ways is long term so beneficial.
Yeah. You become more connected and also more adaptable. Like,
yeah, totally.
There's the concept of like the SAID principle, which is specific adaptation to impose demand. So your body will adapt specifically to the demands you placed on it.
Yeah.
And so, in one sense, balancing on a beam gets you better at balancing on a beam, but it does also make your whole system more adaptable, so that you can then apply the same strategies that you would apply on the beam that you could apply, say, exploring nature, or obviously there's natural beams like logs that you can balance across, but even rock hopping, I've found, or any kind of natural movement really, can be improved or facilitated by spending time on a beam. So that's not to say that a beam is a replacement for nature, but it's a good preparation for nature. And I guess similarly with hand balancing, like, it's a bit of a party trick, and there's really no survival or sort of quote unquote functional need to balance on your hands, but it is fun, and it gives you an insane amount of conditioning through your hands, wrists, fingers, elbows, shoulders, like.
And the confidence that it can give someone, coming into an 8-week program, being a flat out beginner and then getting a handstand by the end of it. It's like, oh wait, I can achieve this. What else can I achieve? Like, how that will follow through onto the rest of their life as well. So
something that they thought was impossible. Like, there's no way I can handstand. Like, no way. Like, it's just too hard. I'm too weak, or I'm not good at balancing. And then they go through the steps, and yes, there's work involved. And this is that sort of work-play continuum or spectrum where you put in work, you condition your body enough so that then you can play with the skill that you're learning, and then that becomes self-sustaining. Yeah. And I guess, that positive cycle of, oh, well, I can hand balance. What else can I do?
Yeah, totally.
And I think handstands are one of those skills, I guess those flashy kind of skills where people go, oh yeah, I want to learn to handstand. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing, and you go, that looks fun, I want to learn to handstand. But it does open you up to, potentially other gymnastic skills or other tumbling or even like ground movement things, like, because you're actually, with handstands, you're actually starting to interact with the ground more. And it certainly opened me up to more like locomotives and I guess capoeira type things, like cartwheels and things like that, which maybe people don't usually look at a cartwheel and go, I want to learn to cartwheel. I guess some people do. But if they do a handstand, then they're like, oh, can I then enter this handstand in a different way through a cartwheel, for instance? Or, it's just opens you up to, like you said, the other potential, the greater potential of your body.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's very lucky. Like, I didn't grow up learning gymnastics. I did spend a very small amount of time in, I don't know, when I was very young, doing like a few gymnastic classes, and then I got back into it in grade 9 or something with like one class a week for I think a year. But even that exposure, I found, set me up really well for learning a lot of other skills. And mind you, throughout my life, I did practice a lot of different sports, like soccer, tennis, basketball, swimming, volleyball. Like, I just had a crack at not pretty much everything, but
that makes
a lot
sense.
of different things.
Of course you did.
Yeah. And I'm that type, like, oh, cool, that looks fun, I'll play that. I'll play that. And unfortunately, my parents were like, yeah, sure, like, pick and choose. And soccer was my main thing. But I found, obviously, playing a lot of different sports, but also even just that little time I spent in gymnastics gave me a huge amount of confidence to just try things, because I guess in a gymnastics setting, there's soft floors, bouncy floors, foam pits, all these things.
So much going on.
Because gymnastics skills are so hard, like, you're guaranteed you're going to fail while learning a gymnastic skill. And so having an environment where you can just fail, and failure is expected, and you might get hurt, but things are set up so that you sort of minimize that hurt. I can only imagine what it would have been like spending like your whole childhood growing up in those environments. I mean, I know there's like a very, I guess, competitive and hard work concept to it as well, but I mean, talk about your experience with that.
Interestingly enough, I'm actually not a competitive person, like, at all. Yeah. But I think, like, with gymnastics too, it's the only sport where it's like you are in a team, but a lot of the time it's very like individual kind of based sport, and it requires a lot because you're doing 4-hour sessions at one time. So the thing that I think gymnastics taught me was it teaches you organization skills, because in that 4 hours, you have a coach, obviously, to coach you and facilitate the session, but a lot of it requires for you to do a lot on your own as well, and to make sure that you get all of the elements done in that 4 hours. So, because there's beam, bars, floor, vault, and then on top of that, there's all the agility work, mobility, and strength. So you've got to fit 4 apparatuses, strength, conditioning, mobility, into 4 hours. And you've got to do parts of that on your own. So it required a lot of independence as well. Yeah. And I think too, like it definitely shapes me, I think, as well, into the person that I am somewhat, because of those elements. But yeah, it's really interesting like that.
Yeah, I think it's such an amazing thing to be exposed to from a young age.
Yeah.
Is that obviously that element of, I think it's really cool. I mean, when I have kids, I probably will get them into gymnastics, probably not competitive gymnastics.
Yeah.
But you do get that really cool mix of work and play where it is hard work and you do have to be disciplined and you do have to be independent in that sense. But also, I imagine it would have been a lot of fun playing on all that apparatus
Yeah,
as well.
it's fun. I actually do remember being scared a lot though, like, because you are falling a lot and I was always worried about getting injured, but I think that worked really well for my personality at the time because it made me realize you can fall and get injured and you're going to be okay. Like, it's all good. Like, you can hit the ground hard and keep going. And I think that teaches a child a lot too, like not wrapping you in cotton wool.
So important. And that's that element of risk. Like, play can be risky. And if you're careful enough, then nothing good or bad will ever happen to you, is a saying that I like. Because if you wrap yourself in cotton wool, you might save yourself from getting injured short term, but you don't know what kind of issues that's creating in the long term. Yeah. Which I think would be a lot worse than a little short term injury.
And I think I got out like just in time that the amount of time spent doing it for me, I sort of exited gymnastics really healthy. So it had a lot of, obviously, those mental benefits that we discussed, but also physical benefits as well. But not to the point of where I was walking away with like 10 injuries like most gymnasts are. So it has its time span and it's a lot shorter than any other sport. So it's not something that you can do forever. Like you could with other sports.
Yeah, it is very, I guess gymnastics as a sport is super high load on the body. Like,
it's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. And I think what most people could do is, maybe go to an adult, or if you're a kid, obviously, or if you have kids, send them to like more of a non-competitive, I would think. Obviously, if they want to compete in gymnastics, let them compete. But at least expose them to the awesome variety of, like you said, strength, mobility, balance. And if you're an adult, then there are usually adult gymnastics classes that you can go to that do teach you some of these skills. And there are a lot of adults who have never experienced that concept or that feeling of falling or the fear of even just, that fear of exposing themselves to something that is way out of their comfort zone. But then having, like, you wouldn't want to just go and backflip in the park and see what happens. But if you have someone coaching you and showing you the progressions, you do, like we were talking about with hand balancing, you do build this confidence of like, oh, actually I can do that. I can do a backwards roll now. Oh, I can jump up and roll. Oh, I can, do a flip with someone there to spot me and whatever.
And the body awareness you gain from that too. Body awareness and coordination is another really, really big thing coming from that. Yeah.
And like we said, that carries over into pretty much any other skill you learn as well. So obviously, if you're learning to backflip, then your body adapts to that load and that skill of backflipping, but the coordination ability and the mobility that you get from training that can then carry over into other skills as well. Yeah. Which is really huge. Speaking of backflips, did I tell you that I was learning to backflip a few years back and landed on my face?
Oh my God.
Because I was like...
Did you balk at the top?
What happened? So I've got a video of it on Instagram. I should show you afterwards. But I did I think I had one session where I was just sort of learning the basics and did the drills. And then the next session, I brought my mate along and we worked through the drills and we did some spots, onto mats and so on. And I was like, oh, I'm getting this. Like, this is cool. And then I tried a few just by myself. It was on not a sprung floor, but it was like a matted, it was like a gymnastic mat floor.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Springs
yeah.
So it was soft, but not that soft. And then I think I got tired, and you can see in the video, I like wig myself out, like I sort of do a few things. I'm like, oh, and like maybe my body knew I was a bit tired. And I went up and I basically just, flattened out at the top and didn't tuck enough. Yeah,
I'm excited to see this video. You should link it on the podcast.
Yeah, I should. Maybe it might be on YouTube. I'm pretty sure I did like a YouTube breakdown of it at the time. And it was not, I was just like, I mean, it wasn't a complete landing on my head, but my face, like I ended up with a huge carpet burn and chipped teeth and or maybe a chipped tooth, I should say. I'm making it sound worse than it was, but and very sort of knocked around. And I was like, oh, like the feeling you get when you land on your face is like, oh my God, it just ruined my whole face.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, like
Yeah.
my teeth are all smashed and my nose is broken and all this. And in the end, it was literally just carpet burn and a chipped tooth. But then my coach at the time, Morgan, this was out at Perform 360.
Yeah.
She was like, you know, checked me out. Are you okay? You know, like, and I was like, yeah, no, I am okay. And I sort of looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, okay, it's not too bad. And then, you know, there was a bit of blood in the mouth and so on. But she was like, okay, it's important that if you're up to it, let's do another one. Spotted onto a mat. Yeah, and
just to get like,
let's just get over that fear. Because if we leave it now, you'll never come back to them. And
true, yeah.
True. So I thought that was really cool because I was like, I do want to keep doing backflips. I don't want to have this.
That is
sketchy.
really good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that she made you do that because that was one of the things that was big. And obviously she's got a background in gymnastics as well.
Yeah, she was very competitive for a long time.
Yeah. So that was one of the things, walk away and come back and don't be fearful of something. So if you if you get an injury during anything and you just walk away from it but don't come back to it, that's when it is worse. Yeah.
And funnily enough, after that I didn't keep training backflips with her, but that was because of my knees. So at the time I was dealing with
you're having knee issues.
Tendinopathy in both quads. And so I was like, all this jumping is not helping it. I had to stop jumping basically, but I then used that as an opportunity to sort of vastly improve my handstand skills, which they did a lot. Like coaching for hand balancing makes all the difference because you just don't know what you're doing upside down.
And you need another eye, as well. Like
you have to.
Yeah, totally. If you've got a bit of a background in it too, and you want, like, you know enough but want another eye, like even someone like me, it would be valuable for progression if I wanted to, say, go and do like single arm handstands or something like that. Like I have an idea of what I need to do, but I'm going to get so much more value out of a coach.
Oh, big time. It makes all the difference. Like I'd been dabbling with handstands for like 3 years before that, just trying to kick up and do wall stuff and everything. And literally like a month with Morgan, a month of coaching of only like once a week, I had like a good line, and because I had the base of strength and, you know, general body awareness that I'd picked up throughout my years, but it literally just took a few tweaks, which I never would have got myself, and then I was like, oh, I feel it now. And so having that coaching, but then I did end up coming back to backflips like maybe a year or so after.
Oh, that was my next question.
When my knees were stronger and no longer painful, I did get back into it. But I think, you know, having that experience of falling in your face, there is still that element of like, is that going to happen? There's like a little bit of that hesitation and fear, but you really do just have to, I guess, push through that or acknowledge that it's there, and then
you need to
do all the progressions that you need to.
Yeah.
Go as basic as you need to and just build up.
It's in our like mind and body's best interest to like keep us safe. So those fear responses are like, you need to like almost thank your body, like, thank you for reminding me that I need to be safe, but I don't need you right now. Yeah, it is true. It's that balance of respecting your body's signals of like, oh, this is scary, and like you don't really need to flip, you might hurt yourself here. But then going, no, I want to learn to flip, or I want to learn to hand balance, or I want to learn to whatever, and you know, I understand the fear, but I'm taking this is the whole concept of, and it applies a lot to chronic pain as well, which I've worked a lot in, is that gradual exposure to things that seem scary at first but are within your capabilities, or even just exposure to, you know, rather than going, I guess in the flip example is, I'm not going to go and flip by myself at the park or on concrete because I know that it would be too scary for me. But if I went and did the steps, got some help,
did some backwards rolls again, did some mat stuff, did some foam pit stuff, did some spotted stuff, did some soft floor stuff, and then got so confident, suddenly the backflip on the concrete or at the park isn't that scary anymore. And maybe it is a little outside my comfort zone, but I'm like, well, I've trained this so many times that I think doing it on here is pretty safe. Like I I know I can land a backflip, so now I can. I'm saying this hypothetically because I can't do that at the moment.
James is going to film a backflip and then post it on the link of this.
Yeah, right after this. I've got these nice soft mats to film on. But, you know, similarly in chronic pain, and you've probably experienced this with some of your clients as well, even though they're not sort of technically seeing you for their pain, but you go, oh, I think you can do this movement, and having someone there to go, yeah, you can do it, and then they try it and they're like, oh, that actually doesn't hurt as much as I expected it to.
Yeah.
And just knowing the principles of progression and regression and scaling movements, you can have so much power, or it gives someone so much power to be guided through something like that, and then for them to experience like, oh, I can do this part of the movement, and I can see how that gets me towards this other movement that I want to be able to do.
Yeah, and they really need and see, like, people need to see the confidence in you as their coach, and knowing that whatever level that they're at, like you said, there is a regression and a progression, and that gives people comfort as well. Just reminding people that they can do it. We're just so adaptable. Like, you know, we're capable of so much. Like our bodies are capable of so much pain and so much, like, everything, and we can adapt so easy, and we just need to remind ourselves of that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think having that as a general mindset, and then acknowledging like, oh, I'm really that you know, XYZ makes me really uncomfortable. I should find someone who can take me through the steps of getting past that discomfort, because, you know, it is something I'd really like to do, or whatever. And I think hand balancing is a great example, and I think even just movement, like getting confidence with movement in general. And this is why I think, you know, the role of a movement coach is so profound and important, is people have just lost touch with their confidence just to move in general. And it's just it's a lack of exposure. But sometimes people just need that guidance of like, yeah, this is correct. And that discomfort you're feeling is okay. Yeah. Because we're out of touch with that. As a society, we're out of touch with what's good pain or bad pain, or, you know, or good discomfort and bad discomfort. And a lot of training and progression involves that sort of good discomfort. Or even sitting on the ground. At first people are like, I don't want to sit on the ground. That's like uncomfortable as. That can't be good for me. It's like, actually, no, that discomfort you're feeling is actually just a sign that you haven't exposed it. And the more you sit on the ground, the more comfortable you become. Yeah. And suddenly, now for me, sitting on the ground is more comfortable than sitting in a chair, because sitting in a chair makes me feel antsy and stiff. And it's like, well, I'd much rather sit on the ground. Move
so much on the ground. The amount of positions we've changed today between the two of us. Like,
which is why I always try to do, I always do the podcast sitting on the ground, or standing up sometimes for Zoom podcasts. But especially, you know, if I'm with someone face to face, sitting on the ground is the way to go. And you do just we have a whole podcast on this, but you just get all this free mobility gains. Like people are trying to mobilize their hips and feet and ankles and everything, but then they're sitting in chairs for the rest of the time. And it's like, you're just taking one step forward and 2 steps back. So let's take away those 2 steps back, and then you get extra steps forward as well. It's just, I think, that's what, this actually takes me back to one of our original points that you were saying. People don't have time. Or they feel like they don't have time. So in one aspect, they need to just start making more time to look after themselves. And in another aspect, they just need to include more habits into their daily life so that it doesn't take extra time. So it makes no difference to our time doing the podcast whether we sit in a chair or sit on the ground, except on the ground we get all this mobility and, you know, just good things for our body, whereas in a chair we're getting the opposite. And so it's like no difference in time, but it's just a habit and what you're willing to expose your body to.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I think that the hardest battle for me is getting clients out of chairs. That's such a battle. Like,
people love their chairs.
Oh my God. Like, I could go on about that forever, but like, I think tools to change habits is valuable as well. So, like different things, like maybe setting an alarm on your phone, or like just utilizing what we have, like the technology we have for good, and using it to sort of help us break habit.
Yeah. And just, well, what has been your experience with clients getting them, like, have you successfully convinced someone to ditch their chairs most of the time and spend more time on the ground, or is it an ongoing battle? Or I've got to pick my people as well. I've noticed, like, I feel like people will just shut off when I go on a rant with this kind of stuff. And when I started my course, like, I feel like in my life, this is the most thing that I've been passionate about, is everything that I've done with the Foot Nerd course and just the pillars of health, that way of living. Like, I'm so passionate about it, and I had to be really careful at the start because I was almost like really pushy with it. And some people don't respond well to that kind of way of approaching it. So I've had to tone it back a little bit and just be careful with like what I say to certain people, and not be careful, but just not feel like I'm trying to push it onto them so much. So my like way of doing it is I'm just like drip feeding information to people, and then, you know, I know that when they're ready, like, they will come and sort of more so approach me to help them with that kind of stuff and the sitting stuff like that. So I guess I kind of went on a bit of a rant about that. But in terms of like trying to get people out of chairs, that's probably the most difficult thing. And some people have changed to the stand desk, but then again, that's just going from sedentary to sedentary. But it's somewhat better that they're getting up and down at least, and then just adding things like getting a trigger ball near their desk so they're standing and triggering their feet. Actually, there have been a couple people really responsive, I should say, to that way of living, and they have noticed physical benefits with that. So that's been good. I think what you touched on there is very important, and it's pretty much just comes down to meeting people where they're at. And it's the same physically, or I guess mentally, psychologically. Like, physically, you don't want to force someone to do something that's just way too much for their body, because they're probably going to end up in pain, or they're just going to be too uncomfortable, and then they're not going to want to do that thing again. And similarly,
baby steps,
if you know, someone comes in, and I found this myself when I first started learning a lot about health and movement and all of these things, you know, you do start to get a bit like evangelical about it. You're like, everyone needs to be doing this. Like,
I know,
how can you not see that?
How is
your,
no one?
your shoes are messing your feet up, and how can you see that? Like, you know,
the
all
shoe
these
battle.
things.
That's the other battle.
And people are like, hey, like, back up. Like, my shoes are fine. Like, I got this. You know, these are good shoes that I paid good money for, or whatever. And then you do run the risk of sort of losing them, or losing the rapport that you could have otherwise built through baby steps. And then they start asking you questions about your shoes, and why do you wear shoes like that, or whatever, however it works. And I think that's a part of why I was really keen to start this podcast, is because what I have found with people who have listened through all our podcasts, they do get drip fed all of these philosophies and concepts that start to make sense as part of a greater whole. And they're like, oh, okay, movement, nutrition, and then play, and
they start
living,
to piece it all
like,
together.
All of this kind of makes sense as a general philosophy for, I guess, natural living, rather than, you know, someone asking me a question, why do you use those shoes, or whatever, and I go, oh, well, I blast them for an hour about all these things that I can sort of say, or you know, people can use the podcast as a resource to go, you know, there's a bunch of podcasts, pick something, you know, you can, if you want to, if you're open to it, then, you know, this topic is really interesting, or whatever. Or if you're interested in this topic, there's a whole podcast on that, you know. And then that way someone can listen to it in their own time. They've chosen to press play on this podcast. They're in a state where they're probably more open and willing to learn. They might be driving, they might be walking, or just doing housework or whatever. But then they're much more likely to take that in, versus especially unsolicited advice from someone going, you should do this, this, and this.
Yeah, I did start. It was really cool. I got a little bit of feedback from it, but I was doing Foot Talk Fridays on my client page.
Oh yeah, cool.
And that's how I was drip feeding them information about just like feet and the damage that shoes are doing, and just different like topics like bunions and stuff like that, and how they're not genetic and the rest of it. And I was like just sort of drip feeding information like that, and that was really good actually. I need to start that up again. And another thing that I've been doing, which is sort of helpful with the movement side of things, is I've been, rather than doing like a program or like physio sort of exercises, I've been sort of giving people like a movement schedule that they can print out and just put on their fridge and tick off as they go. And it just gives them little like, so they can like, when they walk past the fridge, they can like just pick something and then go and do it. So it's not taking away like a huge hour out of their day, but 5 minutes here and there. And it works well for people who work from home.
Little movement snack.
Yeah.
Rather than a fridge snack.
Yeah.
Or I guess you could have both.
Yeah. While you're at the fridge, just do your
grab a
movement
snack
and eat.
and do a movement snack. I think that's huge as well, having little snacks, because people do sort of seem to tend to think of exercise as this thing that is separate to the other aspects of their life, and like, how can I fit in all this exercise that I need to? But if they do have little snacks like that, it doesn't tend to take away from their day. Like, they can fit it in easily, and it actually makes their day better. Like, the more movement you get, the more focused you are, the more energized you are in general. And so you can actually, I find I work a lot better if I'm including little movement snacks throughout the day, rather than just sort of tapping away at a computer or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a study break. Like, if you just like, if you're working or doing something and you are losing concentration or focus, run down the road and come back and you'll feel better.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
And instead of, because a lot of people, like, your brain's going to have to take a break from focusing anyway. And so a lot of people will take that break through scrolling social media, myself included sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's very hard not to do that.
TikTok.
But I'm not on TikTok yet.
Don't get
I'm
TikTok.
not going on it because I feel like that'd be dangerous.
That's like ruthless. Like, you just...
They've cracked some kind of code,
It's
haven't they?
really scary. Like, because I think when you like... I'm not going to go into this too much because it's a waste of time, but when you create your profile, you tick your interests, and I tick comedy. So a lot of the ones that come up are really funny, and I'm just sitting there like, at least I'm like getting the benefit of like laughing. But
but they know what they're doing to keep you hooked. But so, and of course, everything in moderation, or certain things at certain times, I'm sure it would be good to scroll TikTok, and I know there's good stuff on TikTok in terms of like, cooking tips or DIY tips or whatever, and yes, there's value in some of it, but if you can trade at least some of that scrolling time for movement time, you'll find you feel a lot more energized, you're much better place to go back into focused work, and you're doing your body a good thing. And maybe you go onto TikTok and all you follow is movement videos, and then you scroll TikTok,
ideas.
you move, and then you go back into work or whatever. Maybe you could set up something like that. But yeah, the amount of time, and I know this just from personal experience and also just everyone I've talked to, the amount of time that gets wasted on scrolling social media is insane. And people feel like they're out of time for everything else, but if they actually added up the amount of time they were spending on social media, like loose time, not even like not related to work or whatever, then they'd be like, ooh, I can fit in a lot more.
It's scary. And like when your work is on social media, you get caught in the trap of scrolling.
And you can justify it. Oh, it's work.
But I'm looking at all I work on Instagram and Facebook. It's like, oh my God, that someone needs to create a no scroll app where you can only like access the social media platforms without the feed. Yeah. So that you can... Maybe I should have kept that to myself.
Yeah, you should develop that. But yeah, I mean, I've been through different strategies and ways, and I do find... One, if I separate as much as I can, I do all of my social media work off socials. Like if I'm doing captions or whatever, or creating videos, and I'll try to create all that stuff off it, and then all I have to do is copy paste and put it in.
Right, yeah.
And second, I've found that if I am, if my sleep, if I'm sleeping really well, eating well, moving frequently, and just sort of hitting all those aspects, I really do find that I don't have anywhere near as much temptation to go and scroll. Like I'm just on a good zone,
Yeah,
and I'm just like,
interesting.
I'd rather just go and move.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'd
there's
agree with that.
two sort of ways to handle it, but mind you, there's still definitely plenty of times where I just get on a scroll, like whatever you call that, like a scroll hole, where you're just like, ooh. And
Yeah,
then
we
next
still
minute,
slip
20
up.
minutes is gone, and you're like, what have I just been doing?
Yeah. Don't get TikTok then. Just don't do it.
Yeah. I mean, it is, funnily enough, it is on my phone, but I've somehow escaped, like, even just the thought of going on there, I'm like, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
And because I don't have a TFC Australia TikTok, and I don't think I'm going to. But I do have TFC Australia Instagram and Facebook, obviously, and so there is that justification to go on there. So yeah, there's a lot of different strategies. There's a good book called Digital Minimalism that I read at the start of the year that I really rate and I would recommend to anyone listening, about all of those concepts. And he actually recommends not having a social media account if you can.
At all, yeah.
Because it does sort of give you that. We talked about this in the Tribe podcast a few episodes back, but social media gives you, it's like the junk food of connection, where it gives you this sort of reward, chemical
Quick reward,
dopamine bump of like, oh, I got a like or a comment.
Yeah.
And it gives you that, oh, cool, I'm the social status thing. And it does tap into those sort of primal reward centers. But it doesn't give you the in quotes, whole food nutrition connection of facial expression and voice tonality and touch and, all of these things that actually really matter for us.
For connection.
For actual connection.
Yeah.
It's sort of, it's fake connection.
Yeah.
But it can be a very good tool for facilitating in-person connection. So it's a tough balance. I've talked about that. Talked about it with Andy as well, because he's doing really well on the social media side of things, and he gets a lot of engagement.
Shout out to Andy. Good
job. Shout out Andy. And I'm just talking to him how he balances that, because he gets so much engagement on his posts and so many comments, and
he does,
which is great, and it facilitates conversations and it gets people thinking differently and everything. But
that's like a really good example of someone using the platform for like really good.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking of the right person, aren't I? Podiatrist.
Andy,
It's great, and I'm like so stoked that a barefoot podiatrist is doing that well on social media. It's so cool to see.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome, and he. Another one on social is the barefoot podiatrist, Paul Thompson. He does a good job.
Yeah, I follow him too.
I think recently he hasn't. He's not as active as Andy, and they have a different style, but it's both it's very important for. This is what I chatted about with Andy. Actually, is it's very important for people to be able to go on to their social media and see. Oh, there's a podiatrist recommending this thing. Oh, there's a few podiatrists recommending this. This isn't just, some hippies who like being barefoot or whatever. It's like, now there's a physio and an exercise physiologist and a movement coach and a podiatrist and a naturopath and all these people that are going, this is important. We need to look after our feet, and this actually relates to our whole body health as well. And then if they see all of that in their social feeds, it's like, I should probably think about getting some barefoot shoes or going barefoot more often or eating real food or sleeping better, because they see it all from this, like, it's a community, and which is, I guess, the power of the collective aspect is having that, I guess, more authority through collective wisdom rather than, that person, I just blindly trust what that person says. And so... Which
we've fallen into the trap of that. It's like with specialists or like, we just listen to them and you go to your GP and you do what you're told. And it's only like these past 3 years that I've started really, really questioning everything. You need to have like a healthy level of skepticism and a healthy level of being open with all of this stuff. And I think it's just requiring people to think for themselves a lot more, which requires more effort, which is, that's another conversation.
It is. And I think the internet is a funny thing. Like, on that note, in one sense, there's so much more access to information and I guess ability to think differently to what a specialist says, or obviously I'm not saying that everyone should go out and just ignore what their specialist is saying.
No, not at all.
But
Everything serves a place.
Second opinions.
Yeah.
Because there'll be, if you go and get an opinion from 4 different specialists, the likelihood is you'll probably get at least 2 or 3 differing opinions on what you should do, depending on the condition and all of this. But no, it's not like all of medicine has one opinion on, X, Y, Z, and everyone is an individual. And if the main thing is that you find a specialist or an opinion or a perspective that is empowering to you. If someone's saying, you're going to be managing this for the rest of your life, and you're probably going to be in pain, and you're probably going to need, a surgery later on, then definitely get a second opinion, because there's probably going to be someone out there that goes, oh, actually, we can fix this if you do the right rehab and you do the, make the right changes, then we can even avoid surgery. You'll find important. Someone who has a more empowering approach.
Yeah.
And they've found, countless times in research with lots of different conditions, the biggest predictor of outcome is your belief as to whether something's going to work or
Agreed.
not. And your I guess, what do they call it? Therapeutic alliance with the practitioner you're working with. And so if you've got a good rapport with your practitioner, you believe that what they're doing is good and you're empowered by their approach.
Yeah.
Stick with that.
And a bigger example of like seeking different opinions, a bigger example of that is my grandma was given 6 months to live about 9 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, and she was just like, they just wouldn't take that for an answer. And that becomes around belief as well. Like she believed that she wasn't going to die. She didn't die. And they did everything in their power to, keep her alive and outsource things that weren't even regulated in our country yet, but she's still here. So exactly. It's like, that's like a bigger sort of example of that.
It's so interesting how that works. I do remember having this conversation with someone recently. I can't remember if it was on a podcast or not, but some people, like there is that placebo and nocebo effect, where a nocebo effect is basically a negative effect of someone, basically a negative effect of a belief. So someone tells you you've got 6 months to live, and then your body goes, right, I trust this person, they're a doctor, or, they're someone in authority, and they say I've got, or it might be a shaman, it might be, anyone, 6 months to live.
It's the science behind
I trust that person.
Chemicals in your brain, isn't it?
Yeah. Your belief will physically change your physiology.
Big believer in that, yeah.
And, it's been proven time and time again that it does. And you go, well, now I'm going to die. And then you die. Or you have the opposite effect, like you said with your grandma. It's like, nah, F you. Like, I'm going to survive this. You can't tell me I've got 6 months to live. Like, you don't, like, no one really knows.
Yeah,
People just say that because, other people have lived this long with your condition at your stage. And it's like, that doesn't mean anything. Yeah. I'm a different person.
I did hear a story. I don't know how true this story is, but I did hear of someone getting the wrong test results and given 6 months to live, and they monitored their health over the 6 months and it declined like rapidly, and this person was fine, but they got given the wrong results. Yeah. And it's just it like our minds have so much power over our physical health and the connection. Like we've managed to somewhat separate them so much, but the brain and body are not separate.
Yeah.
There's no way.
You just can't separate them.
You cannot. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. And books for that, if anyone is interested in, there's The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. He's like the father of stem cell epigenetics. Cool. Like he was the first one to be like, actually the environment controls the expression of genes, not the DNA itself.
I'm going to have to read that.
It's really good.
I haven't read that yet.
Also a good listen on Audible. I think probably even a better listen than it is a read. And then You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza is another really interesting one. And, people, again, this is something, it gets into like territory where people are like, that's woo-woo, you can't change this. But it's so not
science-backed,
It's not woo-woo anymore. You just haven't looked at the science.
Yeah.
If you think it's woo-woo, you just actually haven't looked at the science.
Yeah. It's the chemical breakdowns in your brain. It's your stress response and the hormones that you create in your brain from stress response.
Yeah.
Has an effect on your body. Like it's pretty... It's
simple.
Yeah.
It's simple biology and physics. And so, reading those books and the whole concept of you are the placebo is in every clinical trial for anything, especially pharmaceuticals, we have to control for the placebo effect.
Oh, yeah.
So why is that? Because the placebo effect is the most powerful mechanism in the world, basically. It's like your brain, you could be taking a sugar pill and your brain will have an effect
But you
of
know
what
that
you
you're a
expect it
test
to be.
subject.
Yeah. And it goes even deeper. Like they've done studies on dentists where, a control group of dentists think they're giving a placebo pain medication, but they don't say that to their patients, but the patients get more pain just because the dentist thinks they're giving placebo, but it's the same medication. It's actual medication. So there's all of these things going on under the hood that we don't fully understand yet, but what we can be sure of is your belief in what you're doing matters. And and if someone's giving you a negative belief of that you're going to be in pain long term, or that you're going to be dysfunctional, or you've got something wrong with you, or you're going to die, seek a second opinion and
question everything.
Yeah,
that's the moral of the story. Question everything.
Don't just take everything at face value. And lean towards things that empower you to take steps on your own to improve.
Totally.
Because there's too many. I mean, I do believe all health practitioners are well-meaning, and even people even people and doctors who say to people, "You've got 6 months to live," they're coming at it from a place of, I don't want to give this person false hope. I've seen people die from this, and I want them to be prepared and to make the preparations with their family and so on. So it's still coming from a good place, but I think they just don't realize how damaging that can be.
So damaging.
To someone.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that they still, with the more current research and current studies, it's crazy to think that they still do that.
Yeah.
But
not everyone stays up to date with all that stuff, and
seems that way.
Yeah, but it's changing. I mean, I don't know whether it seems like it's changing to me because I just hang out with people
because you're in it, yeah,
and you sort of get in your own bubble. I don't know,
collective consciousness around you. Yeah,
which is a thing. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
And even social media feeds are optimized for you to see things that you agree with and like and so on, and so there is that element. But at the same time, it is clear that with the power of the internet, we can make more and more change and connect more and more communities who are on this wavelength. But there is a lot more change to happen.
There's a lot, yeah.
I think I was saying to Andy, I'm like, oh yeah, it's so, barefoot stuff is getting so so popular now. It's so awesome. But then I catch myself and I go, hang on. Everyone you pass on the street is not wearing barefoot shoes. 99 point something% of people are in dress shoes or modern athletic shoes, and it's like,
I walked past someone the other day wearing Vivos, and I was running, and I almost stopped to have a conversation with them because I was like, it's really rare that you'll come across someone wearing those, and I'm like, that's someone I need to connect with. Yeah. And I was like kind of in a bit of a groove, so I didn't stop. Yeah, but fair. I do find myself running and trying to, because I do all of my running in my Vivos, and haven't looked back, and injury free, and I find myself running, looking at everyone's shoes, and I don't. That's one person in 4 years of wearing Vivos.
I know, isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
It's...
And then you, when I passed you running that day.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're looking at it.
It's crazy because you do get into this thought bubble of there's so many people who are into barefoot, awesome. And then you do walk along the street and you're like, actually, that's a tiny fraction and we have so much to change. But I wanted to talk to you about the running stuff as well.
Yeah.
So were you running before transitioning to barefoot shoes or all these barefoot concepts, or did you pick it up as a result of getting into the natural movement, more of the natural movement side of things?
I want to say I've been in my Vivos for nearly 4 years and only consistently running for that long. I was running before that. I had a bit of a different perception around running when I started in the industry, because a lot of the people that I was around were anti-running, and that kind of warped my perception of it.
That sort of lifter gym mentality.
Yeah.
Like, there's no need to do cardio.
Yeah, totally. Like that's how I started in the industry, was with powerlifting, and I competed in powerlifting, which now I see is like it's added so much value to get me to the point that I am now, but very anti-running. So I sort of only introduced running when I sort of started getting into, like I'd only been running for maybe a year on and off.
In sort of normal shoes? Like
in normal shoes, yeah. Not enough to be able to make an assessment or like on my body running in those shoes. Like not enough to feel the effects of running in unnatural footwear. So I don't have much of a measure against the two, so I can't really talk about that too much. But the longest run I've done in barefoot shoes is a 15-kilometer event, and I honestly can't remember the last time I had an injury.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I think I'm eventually, like, I love running and I love helping people with their running, and I do run events, and I've got one coming up in June with a group of ladies who are actually running in unnatural footwear, but it is a battle to get people into natural footwear with running because of the stigma around barefoot running when it's originally came out. I'm not really sure how long it was ago, but I know a heap of runners who are well known in the running world transitioned to the shoe, and it created quite a bad name because they didn't do it properly. Yeah. So I'm really big on transitioning properly and helping people transition as well. And I want to, again, not push it onto these ladies, but provide them with the information they need, and then they can reach out to me.
And lead by example.
Yeah. So I'm just going to continue, like I said before, just drip feeding people information about natural footwear, the causes of continuing to run in unnatural footwear, and the effects that it'll have on your body long term. Yeah. And just touch base with them and say, hey, do you want to look at transitioning? And a few of them have shown interest. So it requires a lot. Like it requires a lot more from your lower limb strength. You need to do more than what most regular runners would be doing, more soft tissue work, more like plantar work, more calf strength, beam, all that kind of stuff. But it is doable. Like I'm evidence of that. And it's worth it. And
because otherwise, again, you're going to have to spend time on that at some point. The shoes just cover it up for a while. The shoes just allow you to get away with it for a while, and then 80, I think it's 75 or 80% of runners get injured every year. So it's like there's something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
And so obviously technique is part of it. General conditioning and strength and mobility is a part of it. And the shoe you're wearing will affect both of those. Yeah.
And I also help my partner transition from unnatural footwear to natural running, and he ran 30Ks.
Yeah, that's epic.
Which is insane.
And doesn't he run straight barefoot as well?
He does, yeah.
He's a savage, isn't
he? Yeah, he is. He's like got like proper slave feet though. Like I reckon his like heritage is like fully slaves. True. Because they're so like wide and
thick and
rugged.
Right. Did he spend a lot of time barefoot growing up, or?
Yeah.
Was he like a farm boy or something, or?
Small town, Ballina.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But he, I'm guessing, was exposed to being barefoot when he was younger and growing up, and then at the beach and stuff like that. They don't really wear shoes around there, I'm pretty sure. Rarely.
Yeah.
So he
that
had
helps.
Yeah. That's my other battle too, is getting him out of those pointy work shoes.
I gotta find him some minimalist dress shoes.
Yeah, because he's obviously in Vivos when he trains, and then he's still in the pointy shoes. I've got to get him out of that.
Yeah, there's some good options now. There's Vivo shoes that are more like, I've got some.
I think I'm just gonna buy him a pair.
Give it to him for his birthday, or just like a random gift. Oh, I got you a gift.
Yeah, he's expecting it. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
No, that's cool though. I mean, it is. Yeah, I think we should stress the importance, like you said, of transitioning properly, because there was a big boom of barefoot shoes back in the day, and people are like, oh, that makes sense. Like, yeah, natural running. Like, and then they just went out and did the same volume they were doing in their traditional shoes, in barefoot shoes. It's like, your feet are not ready for that. And they ended up with stress fractures.
Heaps of stress fractures,
and all of these things, plantar fasciitis, and your body was not ready for that load. It's not that the shoes were bad. It's just that your body wasn't prepared for that load. Yeah. And then, you're right. It got quite a bad name. Podiatrists were like, oh, that gave them a good excuse to be like, barefoot shoes are terrible.
Here's some orthotics.
Make sure you're supporting your feet even more. And I'm pretty sure Vibram ended up in a lawsuit over it, and it was because of some of the claims they made. Yeah. And actually, Nick and Mike did a whole podcast episode. It's one of the earliest ones on that Vibram lawsuit, just breaking it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a good listen.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because it's like, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, but transitioning properly and doing all of the things you need to, but like we said, it is worth it. And I've found
it is.
I mean, even I found, like, because I do a fair bit of foot strengthening work and calf strength and beam work and all of that, and I was like, this was last year. It's like COVID lockdown. I was like, I might start running. And I was like, I should just test out, like, what can I get in a 5K? And I didn't like try to run the whole way. I was like, what is my average speed if I'm walking when I feel like I need to and running when I feel like I can?
Yeah.
And for a week, my calves were like jacked. Like, I could barely walk. And I was like, what have I done? I was like, this is the exact thing that I warn people against.
Yeah.
And I think, sometimes you just got to experience that. Like, oh, that's right. That was too much for my body. Like, I'm running as a new, I've ran before in my life, but I've never been much of like a runner, except in grade 7 when I did kilometer club, which is you just run laps of the oval and get stripes on your arms for how many laps you do. Which was great. It was like, I was so fit.
That's good for kids. All my
sports improved and everything. So that was great. But I've never really kept up with much running, but it was something that I was really keen to do, and I ran and I was like, oh, but I didn't treat that as like, oh, running's not good for me. It was like, I did too much. I'm going to do less next time.
Scale
I'm going to build
back.
Up gradually.
It's your body. It's giving feedback. You pain signals.
Yeah, running isn't bad. My shoes aren't bad. None of this is bad.
All you need to do is feedback. Say, thank you for the feedback. Yeah. Now I know what to do.
I'll respect you now the next time, and I won't run as far. And, but I have found that getting into running more recently and just understanding the principles of natural running and principles of the technique, I haven't really needed any coaching, but my body is also on top of that sort of layer of strength and mobility. My body has sort of self-organized and found a good running technique, because I don't have anything in the way. My body's in decent condition to do that, and I don't have big chunky shoes that are getting in their way, so my body has just sort of figured out an efficient way to do it.
And it will, and that's what our bodies are designed to do, to find an efficient way to do things.
Exactly.
And the load and exposure that running naturally has on your joints and muscles is so beneficial, and you can really feel it, and we should all be able to run a little bit. And I say that to my clients. It's a part of taking that really holistic approach to your training. Like, I'm never ever going to push them to do something where it's going to have a negative effect on their health long term. I'm only going to expose them to what's going to be really beneficial long term, and a small amount of running exposure, I say, is really, really beneficial.
At least being confident to run.
Yeah.
It's so
confident in your body.
I think being confident to sprint, that's something that people should be working towards, because who knows when you're going to have to sprint. Like, we don't have to run away from predators or whatever, but you might have to run away from someone, or you might have to run to someone to save them. People always think emergency situations won't happen to them until it does happen. They're like, I wish I had been prepared for that.
Yeah.
And, obviously, God forbid, or I hope that never happens to anyone, but just having the confidence to run and to sprint if you need to, and just having that ability does represent a good level of athleticism that will keep you in good stead.
And we're not trying to be like professional athlete. It's like that's the thing. It's that healthy balance of like what how easy do you want to make life for yourself as well?
Yeah.
That's another question you need to ask yourself is everything that I do in life, is it hard when I walk up the stairs? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I need to change that.
Yeah.
Just different things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like choose your hard. I think there's an Instagram post that went around. It's like, what was it? It's like, becoming financially adept is hard. Being in debt is hard. Choose your hard. And it's like, learning to run and sprint is hard. Not being able to walk up the stairs and sit up out of a chair when you're older is hard. Choose your hard. Like, it's stuff can be hard, but if you put it in now, it's generally a lot better than having the hard later.
Yeah, it's getting people out of that short-term brain into long-term brain. That's very hard to go short-term to long-term. Like, we as humans do prioritize that short-term pleasure
and survival over long-term. And for good reason. Back in the day, we needed that.
Yeah, it's like when people say, like, I don't have motivation to go to the gym. It's like no one is motivated to go to the gym. The gym is the most unnatural environment for us to be in. And it's in our body's best interest to conserve energy. Yeah. And in our mind, that's not necessary because energy output back in the day was like running away from something. Yeah. And nothing is attacking us. So why would we need to go and exert so much energy? It's like built into our systems. I need to tell people that. I'm just like, look, most of the time, I'm not motivated. It's just habit. And you sort of, especially for those sort of gym strengthening things, but then then there's that balance of play as well, which helps sort of tie it all together. And you do learn to, at first, I think I always find it's a momentum thing, and like you said, a habit thing, where at first the thought of, especially, even me who has spent a lot of time exercising and training and moving in different ways, if I get out of the habit, like recently with my foot injury, I've barely been able to do anything that I would usually do. I haven't been able to run. I've barely been able to walk. I've only really started walking properly the last week. Wow.
And
is that it?
That's
on
it
the
there.
top?
Yeah.
It went that.
It went pretty much all the way, almost all the way through. It's like, yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So Braeden's now looking at it. It's funny. It looks really good on the bottom, and then on the top, it's like this thickened scar tissue because it was Anyway, and I've been out of the habit, and now it's like the thought of doing stuff. I like moving, but the thought of working hard is like, oh, do I really have to do that? But then once you're in the habit, it's like, yes, I'm gonna do this workout. So it's that momentum, like your body sort of, it gets used to being more still, and so it kind of wants you to stay more still. And then if you get used to being more active, then it wants you to stay more active, and it's a self-fulfilling sort of self-sustaining cycle. But that actually might be a good place to wrap up. We're coming up on time. I feel like we could probably talk for another couple of hours. But we should do a follow-up podcast later in the year. And we're in talks. It's sort of taken a bit of a back burner, but we're in talks about doing a feet and hand balancing workshop. So we'll work on that over the coming months, and then maybe we can do a follow-up podcast once we've had those rolling out and sort of chat all about that. But everyone listening, and stay tuned for a cool feet and hand workshop.
Yay.
Start the hand collective.
Oh, hey, has anyone started that yet?
I don't know, but it would be pretty funny.
That would be funny.
I don't think there's not as many issues with hands. People do have hand issues, but people don't wear funky, chunky gloves every day that mess their hands up. So someone should start that, though,
Just for handstands.
Could be us.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Stay tuned.
Yes, exactly. But thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you. See ya.